Hi guys, welcome back to Giant Talk, the world's first OKR podcast in partnership with Koan, the dedicated OKR platform. Today we're bringing you another episode of our Toolbox series, and we're going to be talking about where do I start, specifically with OKRs. I'm Jenny, I'm your Giant Talk host, and today I've got with me Roger. So Roger, do you want to give a short introduction to our listeners?
Yeah, sure. I think people probably know me already, but yeah, I'm the founder of There Be Giants. I set up the business about 10 years ago, and we've been focusing on OKRs specifically for over 6 years now. So we've kind of got a few miles under our belt, and really passionate about them because we can see the huge impact and the huge transformations that they can enable when used really well. Great,
thank you. So as I mentioned, we'd like to think that people know what OKRs are that are listening to this podcast now, but can you give us a quick reminder if people are kind of starting from season one of what OKRs are?
Yeah, sure. So OKRs are, on the face of it, they just look like a different way of writing your goals. But actually, there's a whole collection of kind of principles and practices that underpin them, which genuinely, if followed, then they genuinely feel different to the way that objectives have been used in organizations for decades, which is often in a very set and forget kind of approach. And as such, they are a very engaging, a very collaborative, a very responsive, dare I say, agile way of setting the priorities and making sure that everyone that has to contribute towards those priorities, has a role to play in those priorities, kind of understands that and feels a sense of connection to them, and they fundamentally build very strong alignment through organizations, which is super important at the moment, as pretty much the world has moved to remote working in many aspects overnight in the past 12 months. The need to maintain that alignment is even more important because people aren't actually physically together like they used to be. So that's why we've seen, I think, a huge growth in the demand for OKRs over the past 12 months, because they are an excellent way of helping remote teams to stay connected, stay focused, stay aligned, and stay on track.
Great, thank you. So if we've got listeners listening to this and they think, right, OKRs are for me and for my organisation, and they're probably feeling slightly overwhelmed about where do they start. So where should they start?
Most people usually start by reading a book, which in itself is not a bad thing. And the book that most people turn to is Measure What Matters. And I've got a huge amount of time for Measure What Matters. I'd love to thank John personally because he's raised the profile of OKRs more than anybody else has done. But with all due respect, it's not the Bible. And as I said, OKRs, as far as I look at it, are a collection of practices and principles. It's not a model. So therefore, it is not easy to say, I'm doing it right or I'm doing it wrong. And most people use Measure What Matters as a model and judge their practice by it to kind of sense whether they're doing it right or wrong. And my response to that is, it's not about doing it right or wrong in terms of the book. It's about doing it in the way that's right for your organization. And what we tend to find is that from working with one organization to another, there's probably about 80% of the approach that is similar. But then it's that final 20% which requires a bit of tweaking, a bit of tailoring, a bit of customization, which makes it really meaningful for that organization. And it's really important to nail that 20% because that's what makes it theirs. That's what makes it personal. And that's what makes it relevant to them.
Koan is a purpose-built solution for managing your OKRs. Helps your team achieve their objectives and key results, helps them get aligned, and it helps them stay engaged. Shared spreadsheets simply don't scale when you're using OKRs properly, and you're not going to have a maximum impact with them. But with Koan, you can scale your OKRs right across your entire company, keeping your team super motivated and moving everybody in the right direction. Roger, what's one of your favourite features about Koan?
So the thing that I really love about Koan, and have done ever since I first saw it, was how it really puts the conversation around OKRs at the heart of the system, and it really helps stimulate that, which obviously brings really good collaboration. You know, they've got this reflections feature which helps individuals really prepare for the team conversation which is going to come up, where the collaboration is going to take place. So that would definitely be the thing for me, which is the killer feature of the system.
I suppose, like with most kind of elements in business, there's got to be a degree of kind of flex, I guess, like you're saying, it's about 20% around that, isn't it? So
that's right.
Great. So if we were to kind of give someone maybe a 5-step plan or a step plan to kind of start with OKRs, where would you go with that?
So really good question. The first step I would suggest is to scope out a pilot. There are two ways of approaching this. You could go big bang. You could go across the entire organization, and for smaller organizations that perhaps have a higher capacity for absorbing sudden change, that might be the right thing to do. Okay, so I'm not completely ruling that out, but let's assume that we're talking about an organization that has at least a couple of hundred people in it. Maybe even a larger corporate like some of the ones that we work with. Their capacity for change is still high, but it might need a little bit more time. There's more people involved, there's more complexity, there's more convincing, there's more influencing that's needed. So in that scenario, I've come to find, and indeed our global research report that we published, the second one this year, has indicated that in larger organizations they have a tendency to go for a pilot first, and I think it does reflect the fact that you need a kind of a proof of concept, if you will, to convince the rest of the organization that this is something that's worth doing. And I think that's absolutely a sound business practice. Why wouldn't you? You'd do it with any other type of investment. However, I do see time and time again executive teams, C-level teams, kind of get hold of this new way of working, often after reading John's book, and think, oh, let's just OKR the hell out of the organization. Which I admire their drive and their determination. My recommendation in response to that is, that's great, but just be careful, because if you push it in and you get it wrong, then you actually burn quite a lot of goodwill, and your ability to kind of step things back and maybe try a different route then becomes limited. And I've actually seen OKR implementations, not ones that we've done, but ones that we've kind of come in and helped to kind of get back on track. We've seen them initially fail because that's what they've tried to do. They haven't really understood how OKRs are going to work best in their organization. They haven't stopped really to think about what exactly should they use them for. What would be the benefit in terms of using them for kind of just focusing on growth and change and innovation, perhaps, as opposed to also using them for business as usual. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to scope out a pilot so that you can, in the best interests of OKRs, learn from it. You can test it. You might even call it a test instead of a pilot. But the point is that you're testing, you're learning and adapting. And that is agile practice in practice. That is agile absolutely through and through. And it's also evidence of an organization which is prepared to learn, is prepared to grow from its learning as well, which is an absolute cornerstone of high performance. So, scope out a pilot. The second step I would suggest is, keep that pilot relatively confined in scope. So you actually only have a relatively small number of OKRs that you're working with to start off with, because you don't want to throw too much complexity at it. First of all, build up your experience. To be honest, we tend to find that it takes 3, 4, sometimes even 5 quarterly cycles for an organization to get really good at OKRs. So it's not something which I would say anyone should expect to crack and be absolutely 100% with right from the first cycle. Okay, it takes time. So start small, build up that knowledge, build up that practice, take that opportunity to learn and adapt in the next cycle from it. Okay, and as each cycle goes, just expand it out that little bit further. The third thing I would say is this is perhaps just before you start, you kick things off, and it's part of scoping out the pilot, really. But I think it's worth mentioning explicitly is agree the routines. I mentioned earlier that OKRs, in my view, are a collection of principles and practices. One of those practices is regular discussion, regular conversation, regular check-in. As I mentioned before, a lot of MBO activities over previous decades have been very much around setting objectives, and then often they don't get looked at until the end of the period. And those objectives have very little influence actually on the work that is then done throughout that period. For OKRs to have a really strong influence and be that sort of guiding light throughout the period, you need to have that regular check-in point. Whether it's at team level, whether it's at senior level, there needs to be that routine. And it's important to synchronize those so that you've got the team ones happening at a time where the data is captured, and that then rolls up to allow the senior teams to have their reviews. So it's that kind of synchronization of routines across the organization. And this is where, as well, having a good system in place really helps with that, because it helps to make the routines slick, easy to do. It's good if you can integrate OKRs with existing routines as well, rather than layering new ones on top. So if a team, for instance, has a regular meeting that they do every week or every 2 weeks, could OKRs be integrated into that rather than having to create a new OKR meeting? You've got much better chance of the change actually sticking if you can integrate it with what's there already. The fourth one would be, as I kind of alluded to earlier on, is to run it and then reflect on it. This is the test, learn, adapt mantra that we're big fans of and big believers in. You shouldn't expect to get it right first time. You should expect some things to go wrong. If things don't go wrong somewhere, I would say you're probably not trying hard enough. You're probably not trying hard enough. Because I would expect you to be taking some risks and trying new things, and new things don't always work. And it's that experimentation, obviously, so long as you're not experimenting with the future of the business, of course, but it's that kind of controlled, sensible risk taking, which is what leads to really, really insightful learning, and therefore significant improvement with the next cycle, the next iteration, which is the final stage. Whatever comes out of that reflection at the end of the pilot, for argument's sake, that you really do make sure that you've captured those learning points and that you make those modifications for the next cycle. Even if it's just a small, few tweaks here and there, the important thing is that you're constantly iterating and constantly improving. And then this should never stop. Once you get OKRs in place and they are officially launched, as opposed to just being in pilot stage, you should continue to reflect on how they're running as a process for you as a business, because there is this principle of system decay. And that is, if you don't continually invest in a system and update it, then over time it starts to lose relevance and decrease in the value that it provides and the benefit you gain from it. And OKRs are an organizational system. and they are no exception. So it's about just checking in and making sure that the way that you're using them is still delivering that value that you are looking for from them. And that is something, like I say, that should never stop.
Great, thanks for that, Rog. Really fascinating discussion, that one. So I think we've given people a brief overview of where they can get started with OKRs and probably whetted the appetite for quite a few of our listeners. So if you are one of those listeners that's thinking, right, I want to find out more, we've got lots of resources and tools on the There Be Giants website. Just head to therebegiants.com. And you can also obviously reach out to us if you've got any specific questions via email at growth@therebegiants.com. Next time in the Toolbox series, we'll be talking about crafting awesome OKRs. So join us then, and thanks for listening.